Welcome to 20-Minute Photo Guide. I'm Don. I do most of the still photography.
I'm Anya and I do most of the videos.
We'll take you to our favorite places. We'll help you learn best locations, employ proper gear, and discover magic light.
Thanks for coming along.
In this edition of the 20-Minute Photo Guide, I'm going to cover and discuss the best locations for bird photography and other wildlife in Southwest Florida. Now I'm talking about an area roughly around Fort Myers and within a 1 to 2 hour driving radius from there. Okay, the timing for this is possibly you could start in January of the year, but February, March, and April are going to be the prime months for what we cover in this 20-minute photo guide. If you use my techniques and my locations, but you show up in August, you may not see a bird and you might think that we are full of it. Well, that's because the timing in the winter or the early spring months is the best, because that's when the birds are nesting and they're also congregating in some of the areas that we cover. Location number 1 is Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge. This is on Sanibel Island, just off the mainland. There is a causeway that connects the island to the mainland. There is a toll required for crossing over the bridge. And before you go out to Ding Darling, you want to check a tide chart. And you want to coincide that low tide that happens right around the sunrise. That's the best time to be out there at Ding Darling for the morning. Also check your tide chart and try to time your visit for when there's a low tide at sunset. Whenever you have a low tide out at Ding Darling, this is when you can get feeding frenzies. During the sunset time, the birds will come in to roost and they'll gather on some of these sandbars that expose themselves at low tide. All right, a couple of logistical things to think about when visiting Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge. It is the type of refuge that involves a one-way loop road that you drive on. And so I like to start out at the beginning at sunrise or when they open, which is typically 7 o'clock in the morning or 7:30 in the morning, depending on the time of year. So I start out driving and I stop at the first water area, or I call them ponds, and I see how the activity is there. You can go a little bit closer to the water, although you'll see signs that say do not go beyond this area, but you can stand at the edge of the water and set up your tripod and photograph if there's activity in the pond where you stop. Then once that activity slows down or there is no activity, then I get back in my vehicle and I drive to the next water area or pond and I see how the activity is there and I photograph and continue on my day going throughout the refuge like that. Equipment-wise, what you're going to want at Ding Darling is the longest lens that you have. The water birds are going to be out there at a distance sometimes, catching their fish or feeding on their crustaceans. And so I think it's important to have as much zoom power as you can possibly get. I like to use my 600 millimeter lens. And on my full frame camera, I will often add my 1.4 teleconverter, so I have 840 millimeters of power. Or I use my 600 millimeter lens and I put it on my crop sensor camera, and then at the maximum zoom range I get 900 millimeters of power. Photography location number 2 is called the Venice Rookery. This is a place that's owned by the National Audubon Society. It's located about an hour and a half north of Fort Myers off of a road called Jacaranda Boulevard. That's just south of US 41. And it's a very small place. What it is it's a pond, basically a retention pond, which has one little island out in the middle of it. And that island gets lots and lots of nesting herons, egrets, and hingas, and more. And depending on when you go to visit, you may have birds gathering nesting material and bringing them back to build their nests on the island. Or you may have birds that have chicks and the parents will go off to catch fish and bring the fish back to feed their babies. As I mentioned, the Venice Rookery is owned by the Audubon Society. It's free to visit, and it's certainly your timing is best if you go right as the sun is rising and you photograph for those first 2 to 3 hours of morning light. You'll have front light on the island and the birds, and the activity is just great in the mornings. Equipment-wise for the Venice Rookery, you're going to be fairly close to these birds, so anything between a 300 and a 600 millimeter lens would be enough. If you're going to do these large birds carrying sticks while they're building their nests, you're going to need to zoom back a little bit, and so I recommend a 200 to 300 millimeter lens for that. If you're going to be going after the chicks on the nest and the parents feeding those chicks, that's a little bit further away, and then you're going to need your 500 to 600 millimeter lens. But it's great to have a tripod here. You just set up your tripod on a certain spot and you just wait for the activity to happen in front of you. I like to go on cloudy days, or sunny days are good too, to get that front lit and those fast shutter speeds to get those birds in flight. Photography location number 3 is called Bunchy Beach. This place is located off John Morris Road, which is just north of Fort Myers Beach itself. This is a little preserved area which is also great at low tide. You want to consult your tide chart and try to time your visit to Bunchy Beach when you have a low tide that happens around the same time as the sunrise. This is a morning location, and it's a great place for shorebirds, herons, and egrets feeding and preening and doing water bird type things. Be prepared to get your feet wet at this location. You're going to be wading out, and you're going to possibly walk quite a ways out following the birds or going to where you see the birds in order to photograph them. Wear knee pads and some water shoes to protect your feet from sharp corals and things like that. And get out there with your tripod in a low position. Get down low to get those great low angle shots of these herons and egrets feeding, and you can get some reflection shots sometimes. Equipment wise, I like to have a zoom lens when I'm visiting Bunchy Beach. I like to have the opportunity to photograph the big birds, which are sometimes very friendly, and then I also like to be able to zoom out to get those smaller shorebirds, those sanderlings and things like that, that are quick to move away from you if you try to approach too quickly. But get yourself into a position, take your time, and let the birds come towards you, and you'll have better luck. So I like to have my 200 to 600 on my full frame camera when I'm here, and that way I get the opportunity to photograph both the closer in bigger birds and the further away small birds with just one lens without changing lenses while I'm wading through the water. Photography location number 4 is called the Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary. This is off Immokalee Road, about a 40-minute drive from Fort Myers itself. This is southwest of Fort Myers, and it's another Audubon property. There is an entry fee that is charged. It's currently $17, and the hours of the refuge are from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Reservations are currently also required, and so you need to go online and make a reservation for the day that you visit. The Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary is a wonderful place to be a bird photographer or a wildlife photographer. It's got a boardwalk that winds 2¼ miles through an old-growth cypress swamp. This place is magic to be in the morning. There are massive, huge cypress trees. There's an amazing variety of birds. Now, typically the birds won't be in huge numbers, but the variety of species is fantastic at this place. Yes, sometimes during a low water year, when a lot of the surrounding water has dried up, begins to congregate in some of the ponds here at Corkscrew Swamp, then you can get good numbers of herons, egrets, and other birds that are feeding amongst the water that remains. But even during a wet year, you can expect to see owls, warblers, songbirds that are passing through during the springtime, woodpeckers, and other wildlife such as massive alligators, raccoons. There can be turtles, squirrels, lizards, and much more at Corkscrew Swamp. I just love being at Corkscrew. I bring all of my lenses when I go there because there are some scenic photo opportunities. So I bring a wide angle lens as well as my bird and wildlife lens. I typically don't use a tripod when I'm visiting Corkscrew Audubon Sanctuary, only because you have to stick to the boardwalks, and that's the whole point of being here, is because you're able to stay dry while you're up on the boardwalk and exploring this gorgeous swamp area. And so I typically try to handhold, and there is a railing along most of the boardwalk, and so you can lean against that to get some more steady shots if you need to, if you've got slower shutter speeds. But I bump up my ISO a little bit, and I try to get those faster shutter speeds so that I can handhold while visiting this awesome, amazing boardwalk. Photography location number 5 is the burrowing owls of Cape Coral. Cape Coral is a town which is just northwest of Fort Myers itself, and this area is well known for their burrowing owl population. The Cape Coral area is proud of their owls, and the year-round residents are happy that they have burrowing owls in their midst. They have a sustained population of around 2,000 burrowing owls. This means that there can be up to 1,000 burrowing sites throughout the town. Den sites move and change from year to year, but some great spots to check would be the Cape Coral Library, the ball fields located at Pelican Boulevard and 42nd Terrace Streets, and the Rotary Park. You can check a website like eBird for recent activities and sightings before you head out to Cape Coral. And I like to go on a cloudy or even a rainy or a misty morning, and that seems to bring more birds out of their burrows, and they just seem to enjoy those cloudy or rain-filled days much better than a blasting hot sunny day. Equipment-wise for burrowing owls, they're very friendly and they're highly tolerant of people, but you don't want to get too close, so you want to give them some space. So I like a zoom lens in the range of 200 to 400 millimeters. Photography location number 6 is called Shark Valley. This is an area of Everglades National Park. It's located off US 41 south of Fort Myers by about a 2-hour drive. It's totally worth the drive, especially during a dry year. As I said, Shark Valley is part of Everglades National Park. It's open all the time to foot traffic and from 8:30 to 6 p.m. to vehicles. Motivated photographers should park along the main road, get well off the road and avoid any signs that say no parking here, and then walk in to get that early morning light and to get the best bird activity. What you can expect here at Shark Valley, especially as I mentioned during a low water year, is fishing herons, egrets, and hingas, and cormorants. The possibilities here for fishing birds is excellent. Sometimes you get nesting anhingas right across the little canal. You'll see all kinds of things here. You'll see possibly hawks, huge alligators, turtles, and more. There is a tramway that goes to the very back of Shark Valley area, but I don't think it's worth it for photographers. It's more of a tourist thing to do if you're there with your family and after you get done photographing, maybe you could take that tramway, but I find the best photography to be up there near the entrance station, again in that canal that's off to the right-hand side between the entrance station and about 200 yards towards the back. Equipment-wise, what you want here is just a zoom lens. You don't need a ton of power here. The birds are almost always going to be very close to you. They are tolerant of people. They see people every single day. And so something in the range of 200 to 400 or 500 millimeters is enough power. I do use a tripod here. Oftentimes I'm waiting for a bird that looks like he's going to catch a fish, and it might take a little while, so I set my camera up on my tripod and I just plop myself down and I just sit and wait for the birds. Photography location number 7 is called the Sanibel Island Lighthouse and Fishing Pier, or also known as the Lighthouse Beach Park. This is located on Sanibel Island. Again, it requires a toll to get over the bridge on the causeway from the mainland to Sanibel Island. This is a great evening location. Not only can you get sunset as the sun sets over the water, but you can also get a lot of bird activity because there's fishermen on the little fishing pier that's here at this park. On that little fishing pier, sometimes there are very friendly egrets and herons, ibises, pelicans, and other birds that are looking for the fishermen to drop some bait or to throw a dead fish in the water or something like that. And so you can get very close to these herons and egrets, and this is a great place to just hang out in the evening, wait for the sun to set. I've seen bottlenose dolphins come very close to shore here. And it's a great place to practice your flight shots of very slow-moving pelicans. For this area, equipment-wise, I usually don't use a tripod because I like to be able to wander both up on the fishing pier and down onto the beach quickly if I see some birds feeding down there. And so I like to have a zoom lens as well. Something like my 200 to 600 Sony lens works perfect here. I can zoom way in and do those portraits if the bird's sitting waiting for a handout. And then if I see a bird down at the beach fishing or preening or something like that, so I can also go down and get that very easily as well. There are some scenic shots from this pier, so I also throw in my backpack my scenic lens, my 28 to 200, so I can get that last bit of sunset colors as the sun sets over the water to the west. Photography location number 8 is called the 6 Mile Cypress Slough. This place is located just about 15 minutes northwest of the Southwest Florida International Airport. It's located off the road called 6 Mile Cypress Parkway, just north of Daniels Parkway. But this is a great place to be a wildlife photographer and also an excellent place to be a scenic photographer. It feels like this place is kind of an oasis amongst the city. There are some beautiful boardwalks here that wind through and past ponds and water areas and cypress forests. And if you come here during the right year, you'll see all types of birds here. You can find songbirds, you can find owls and big alligators. You can also see some feeding herons and egrets at this park. And even though you're in the midst of the city when you're at this park, it doesn't feel like it. It feels like you're surrounded by nature. Come here 2 to 3 hours before the sun sets. Just take any of the boardwalk paths, wander around with a zoom lens snapped onto your camera, something like a 200 to 400 or my 200 to 600 works perfect here, and just see what you see. You can get some scenic shots, so I also throw in my bag my 28 to 200 scenic lens, and I do boardwalk shots, and I do bald cypress tree shots, and hanging Spanish moss shots, and then I do the birds and the wildlife activity that I see as well. Okay, so to wrap up this 20-minute photo guide to the birds of Southwest Florida and other wildlife, of course, I'd like to say, again, timing is critical. Not only do you have to be there during the right months of the year, January, possibly, but February starts to get really good, March is fantastic, and then April the activity starts to taper off a little bit. But timing as far as your hours go is important as well. Mornings are fantastic. There are less places where evenings are good, but there are still some locations, as I mentioned, where evening photography can be okay. Come to Southwest Florida at the right time, get fantastic pictures of birds and other wildlife. And as always, Anya and I appreciate you watching our 20-minute photo guides. Stay tuned for more. Please subscribe if you haven't, and we'll see you soon.